Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. The push for equality continues for women, and the latest step forward towards that perfect equality with men. Well, as ladies, you soon may have an equal opportunity to die on a foreign battlefield for your country. Yes, women soon may be required, actually, to register for the draft along with men at 18 years old. You earned it, baby. Here's the article from The Hill, which reads, quote, the Senate Armed Services Committee has approved language in its annual defense policy bill that would require women to register for the draft. The National Defense Authorization Act, approved by the committee behind closed doors Wednesday, amends the Military Selective Service Act to require the registration of women for selective service, according to a summary released on Thursday. The United States has not instituted a draft since the Vietnam War, and Pentagon officials have repeatedly said that they intend to keep the force all volunteer. But men ages 18 through 25 still have to register with what's officially known as the Selective Service System, or face consequences such as losing access to federal financial aid for college, end quote. Well, it seems that feminism might be a victim of its own success, depending on how you look at this. Since the 60s, women have been told essentially this: be more like men and do what men do, really. And what do men do historically? Well, for one, they go to war, right? They go out and conquer. They explore like Magellan or Lewis and Clark, and they fight for dominance. And we see this pattern in men all throughout nature, not just in male humans either. I mean, men have always pursued status and career success, and they also choose the high-stress jobs and everything else, spending endless hours chasing promotions, money, climbing the corporate ladder, accumulating wealth, and they take considerable risks to do all of this. Because climbing the corporate ladder is hard. It's hard work. Starting a business is a gamble and super stressful. You could lose everything. And exploring new frontiers, that often gets you killed. There's a reason that men die earlier on average. So why do men do these things? I mean, one very unpopular argument these days would be that it's their nature, because they're genetically predisposed to and naturally oriented to such behaviors. And one good reason for reality may be that men are very interested in women, and most women are not interested in a male partner who is not at least their equal. Women are smart and choosy about their mates. So competence in a man is attractive to women. And so is being able to be self-sufficient and also have just be able to be, powerful and do your own thing. So men are driven to gain status and security in order to attract a woman. And so basically what I'm saying is this: there's a biological reality to what makes a dude a dude, right? So until about 5 minutes ago, we all understood that, and religious tradition and biological science also affirmed this. But feminists had a problem with all of this. And that's because feminists believe that men in general have it better in life somehow. And no doubt, in some ways, I guess that's true. And they argue that the only reason that men have it better is because of old school traditional ideas about gender roles born of cultural traditions that have been handed down. So in other words, men and women are just kind of role-playing, acting out gender stereotypes handed to them by society. They're gender constructs, say modern feminists, like the third and fourth wave. How many waves are there? And like the whole idea that blue is for boys and pink is for girls, or playing football for boys and maybe cheerleading for girls. And if you just gave little girls the football, they'd be all out there. They would all be playing Pop Warner too. So of course, this is all kind of absurd, right? It's absurd because men and women, they're not interchangeable. Men and women are different, and every 4-year-old knows this. But academics and progressive ideologues or radical feminists, they don't really accept biological reality. And because of that, you have some real-world consequences to this modern multi-wave feminist argument that men and women are exactly the same. And this idea that men and women, if they were not limited by society to traditional gender roles, it's really taking root. And we're just supposed to believe that most men would just as soon as join a book club, watch The View, and play with dolls as, I don't know, maybe go and watch MMA, right? Or maybe play football, I don't know. And women would do all of the things that men traditionally have done, and given the right stimuli. Because the feminists argue that there's another reality, a reality that does actually play a role in shaping us, known as nurture. Nurture is a very real thing. And because all of us are, at least partly, a reflection of our upbringing and culture, to be sure. So not denying the role that culture and upbringing can play in shaping expectations for men and women's roles in society. I mean, it's kind of hard to do that. And by the way, I do believe that a woman's God-given talent shouldn't be limited. She should be able to become anything that she's capable of becoming. I mean, I can't believe I have to pay this indulgence just to be able to make just the overall broad, nuanced discussion, have a discussion about it. But you always have to pay that indulgence. Oh, she's capable of being, we know. The next president, great, even a soldier. Society's not putting limits on, they're not putting limits on women. And that's a good thing. Society benefits when everybody is free to flourish. I mean, you had Ruths and Deborahs in the Bible, right? And when everyone's able to do it regardless of their gender. But now you have the third and fourth wave feminists and progressive ideologues. They just want us to think that and really ultimately believe only in nurture and deny the nature aspect of nature versus nature and nurture, right? So again, by ignoring nature, you get the idea that men and women are completely and entirely interchangeable. So this is, I guess, why we see dudes who identify as women maybe competing in women's sports, even though they competed as men in male sports even just a few years earlier. You have fourth wave feminism. They want to ignore a biological reality altogether, even if it actually harms women. So that brings me to the question of what in the world is the point of feminism if it ends up harming women, right? And that all brings us to this proposal that allow women to be drafted. So if we deny biological reality as a society, then that's the expected result. It means an 18-year-old woman is going to be drafted to fight on battlefields. I mean, women wanted to have combat roles, and so ultimately that means they could be right there on a battlefield against men. By the way, as I don't believe other countries, especially ones hostile to us, I don't think that they would have women on their battlefield. I mean, I realize also that wars are fought differently, but you never know when it's going to take a ground force. And our rivals, unlike modern America, they still believe in nature. I'm not saying anything positive about it. They also believe in a whole bunch of other murderous stuff. But at the same time, they also want to try to be lethal and have military preparedness. But there is a biological reality. In any case, some progressives are certainly going to applaud the fact that women may soon be eligible to be drafted. They're going to act like it's a big victory. Some feminists are going to say that it's long overdue. It's a big step forward for women. Is it, though? I mean, is it really a big step forward for women? Is it a big step forward for daughters, for sisters, for your wives? And will it, and really, I mean, ultimately think about it, it will be daughters and wives and sisters that might die for a new version of equality that progressives want so badly, no matter the cost. I'm not suggesting that there aren't any benefits at all for women being, for serving. I will say that, eligible for the draft is one thing, but one benefit may be that maybe the whole idea that of nation building and getting involved in everyone else's conflicts, maybe people will think twice about engaging in foreign wars if you have to have your daughters that now die on the battlefield along with your sons. So I'm just asking questions about this new interchangeability between men and women that we're fast adopting in America because of third and fourth wave feminism. So for some historical context, here's a famous ad from 1968. This celebrated women's entry en masse into the male-dominated workplace. You've come a long way, baby. That's the Virginia print. My gosh, that's such an old ad. Has this sassy-looking woman, and is it a jumpsuit? I don't even know what she's wearing. I think it is a jumpsuit. What in the world are with those heels? So she's selling cigarettes. First wave feminism opened up the possibility for women to pursue careers just like the boys, and so women did. And since women are incredibly smart and capable, they've succeeded in the workplace beyond any feminist imagination. In fact, women have been super successful in spite of feminism. Women account for half the workforce in America. They're CEOs, scientists, all this stuff, right? I mean, maybe even soldiers now conscripted to fight on battlefields. Now, I bring all of this up to say this. On its face, there's a lot to celebrate about all the progress for women, right? But feminism hasn't been without major costs and a lot of illogic. And we don't ever really actually talk about the costs. And this is where some people won't like it. Let's just face it, there's costs and there's trade-offs due to third and fourth wave feminism. So not long after the slogan, "You come a long way, baby," and another meme was born, the latchkey kid, these were people who kind of had to raise themselves in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It's me, a baby Gen X, coming home to empty houses because everybody was out working and we had to kind of make our own little dinner, and we were sort of home by ourselves until, maybe about 6 o'clock at night. And of course, the culture celebrated the new working woman with ads like this. Watch.
'Cause I'm a woman. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let you forget you're a man.
Give her Enjoli, the 8-hour perfume for the 24-hour woman.
I can work till 5 o'clock, come home and read you tickety-tock.
Tonight I'm gonna cook for the kids.
And if it's loving you one, I can kiss you and give you the shivering fit.
Enjoli, the 8-hour perfume for your 24-hour woman.
I am mentally dying. During and after the 60s, rates of divorce climbed, not surprising. After all, you had women and men mixing it up at work, spending lots of time with powerful, attractive people of the opposite sex. Everybody was away from their families. But the third and fourth wave, they were very happy because women were becoming more like men. Isn't that insane? Like, you can't even value your own intrinsic worth, and the only way that you can actually measure and validate your own worth is to compare yourself to the thing that you say you dislike. Pursuing careers and relationships, all the like. Soon, women were even getting it on. They were having sex like men, which was to say that it was decoupled from responsibility, because then you had abortion on demand and you had birth control also. And abortion on demand, that really rose. Again, this was seen as a step forward by feminists. Casual sex was common. Feminists were happy. Women, that was viewed as empowerment. And women were now having all kinds of casual hookups. Just like men, they thought were always free to do. Of course, because they were always free to do, it didn't mean that they should have. By virtue of the fact that men obviously can't get pregnant. I mean, I don't know, now it's 2021 and they're gonna tell you otherwise. But of course, birth control isn't always used or always effective, so that meant a lot of kids that were being born, not with a two-parent household. And that was a problem for a lot of women too, because they viewed children as holding them back from a career and all of the whole all-important corner office. So you just really dream up this made-up constitutional right that's never existed, this whole abortion right, which is always portrayed as healthcare. And any feminist now, they act like that's the most important right today. Because after all, women pursuing career success and self-actualization like men get to do, that's the most important right of all, according to these third and fourth wave feminists. Now, even if that personal freedom and success comes at the expense of a woman starting a family and then maybe using abortion as last-ditch birth control, too-late birth control, that probably helps explain the dehumanization of the unborn, because it's easier to dispose of someone if you unperson them, if you devalue them. All I'm saying is this, look, this first and second wave feminism, the Susan B. Anthony, suffrage, everything else, I get it. But now when you're looking at third and fourth wave feminism, this is about establishing a matriarchy. And it's not about equalizing women to men. It's about undermining men. You don't build yourself up by devaluing the other sex. This is not how it works. And it's incredibly costly to the nuclear family, to kids, to the fabric of America itself. And any woman's gonna tell you, like myself, when you pursue a career, it is a trade-off, just as it is a trade-off for men. You have long hours, you have stress, you're spending time away from your kids, you have a sense that you can never get it all done. And though this is not to say that women should not pursue careers, there are trade-offs in life, trade-offs with everything, because that's how life works. But third and fourth wave told women lies like you can have it all. This is a really interesting interview from The Atlantic a number of years ago. Former Pepsi company chairman and CEO Indra Nooyi. She said this after leading the Fortune 500 company for many years about the idea that women can have it all. Watch.
I don't think women can have it all. I just don't think so. We pretend we have it all. We pretend we can have it all. My husband and I married for 34 years, and we have 2 daughters. And every day you have to make a decision on whether you are going to be a wife or a mother. In fact, many times during the day, you have to make those decisions. And you have to co-opt a lot of people to help you. We co-opted our families to help us. We plan our lives meticulously so we can be decent parents. But if you ask our daughters, I'm not sure they will say that I've been a good mom. I'm not sure. And I try all kinds of coping mechanisms.
That was a really honest take, and kudos to her for being so unbelievably honest about it. You don't really get that from anybody today. It's a very honest take from someone who would probably define herself today as a feminist. So what, now we have fourth wave feminism, the version that argues there's literally no difference between men and women? This false idea, perhaps, was maybe always the destination of a movement that denied biological reality from the beginning. At least it morphed, it took something that started to actually give women rights and to equalize them in terms of standing before the law, and then took it now to where I don't even know what is feminism if they can't even stand up for women against men who want to identify as women and compete against them in sports. Now we're arguing that everything about men and women are simply cultural constructs. And we're told that there's not really any difference at all whatsoever between the sexes. So a man can now identify as a woman and therefore he's a woman. And if you don't say it, then you're slurred as a TERF. And a woman can be a man simply by believing that it's so. I won $1 million. After all, the new biological reality, we're told, is that biology and gender are totally unconnected. And gender and traditional gender roles, they're just outdated cultural constructs from America's past. Now that lie has real world consequences. So like biological men who believe that they are women who identify that, as that, winning Miss America pageants, defeating biological women in sports, this will only continue, especially in sports, by the way, because whether fourth wave feminism wants to acknowledge biological reality or not, biological reality doesn't go away. And it doesn't rely on you acknowledging it in order for it to exist. And so the trade-offs continue, and they only seem to get really bigger and costlier for women. The latest real-world consequence may soon be women can be drafted just like men into the military. And everyone's going to celebrate it, at least on the left, as this huge step forward by progressives. But like all of the so-called steps forward for women's equality, there are trade-offs. Are you ready to see your all's daughter marched off into war? Maybe against her will? And we could talk about whether there should be a draft at all, because no, there shouldn't be. It's ridiculous. Why are we even having this conversation? It's anti-conservative and anti-constitutional. But the reality that a draft could be activated at any time, that's real. I mean, think about it. The world is so ridiculously unstable right now. Look what's happening in the Pacific. Look what's happening in the Black Sea with Russia and Ukraine. And of course, now they just bypass Ukraine entirely. Ukraine lost its position as a transit country and a key piece to Russia's infrastructure, energy infrastructure. And so now, wow, Ukraine's not even protected anymore. You might see your daughter, your wife, your sister called to serve sooner than you think. And again, there's that stubborn biological reality that rears its head on a battlefield. Because see, even if it does come, and in many instances, the close combat is in close quarters, you don't really have everybody lining up on a battlefield like the days of yore, but brute strength matters a lot. And that's why war has been fought traditionally by men. Now, there are a lot of other things that women can do in the military and do in the military. There's also, we could discuss the psychological and emotional tolls, but if a woman has the skills and strength to participate in the military without anyone having to lower standards and they want to, great, that exists. But let's not treat the exception like the rule. And drafting women, compelling them to serve, something else entirely. I mean, you're putting women in harm's way without regard for their uniqueness, their differences, and yes, their biological reality. And though modern feminists will never admit it, the trade-offs and the consequences for this newfound right, the opportunity to be drafted, one of them is going to be you could die for your country in the same way that millions of American males have. Military historians have noted, and this is true across all wars and all soldiers, that when men die on the battlefield and their dying breath, a lot of them cry out for mothers. And soon our daughters, thanks to fourth wave feminism now, will have the opportunity to do the same. No country that has ever been great in the history of this world has ever sacrificed something so precious as its women. The IRS now seems to increasingly be targeting Christian charities. Why is that? Congressman Mike Kelly joins us to discuss it. Stick around. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and as a CIA contractor, and he does a lot of veterans advocacy work. A lot of people would have to do a lot more to even get close to touching it. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission of supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. So this summer, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to close your Twitter account and stop arguing with randos on the internet. Whether you're brewing the perfect cup of pour over or cracking open a can of 300 on your next backcountry mission, Black Rifle Coffee will fuel your way wherever summer decides to take you. So head on over to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV to order yours and use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your summer with America's coffee. Black Rifle Coffee. Congressman Mike Kelly is fired up that the IRS leaked tax records and tried to withhold a tax status from a Christian organization simply because that organization has biblical views that some bureaucrats thought were too closely aligned with Republican politics. He joins us now to discuss it. Congressman, thank you so much for also raising awareness for all of this. This story is insane. Tell us what happened, because from what I understand, this has to do with one particular Christian charity, Christians Engaged, and they were told, the IRS told them that they were not eligible or entitled to tax-exempt status just because that some Republicans happen to think a lot like they do. That sounds like a really, really weird measure to me.
Yeah, when you say weird, you're being very kind. This is something that's become kind of a continual abuse by the IRS. They pick and choose who they want to go after. And unfortunately, in this case, they go after Christians Engaged, and they try to pull us in to say, well, a lot of these beliefs that you have, this biblical reference that you have, and a lot of these things that you really believe in, they're too closely aligned to the Republican Party. We're not going to give you that tax-free status. Now, if you were to talk to the IRS today, then they'd say, oh, no, we pulled back on that. That was a mistake, only because they got exposed for doing it. Had this not come out, had we had not heard about it, had there not been a pushback, this would have gone into effect. And the IRS tells me all the time, no, Congressman, you really have to give us a little bit of time. I say, the time is the one thing we don't have. And I think you and I would agree, and all the folks that we talk to every day would agree, this country, our nation right now, the people of this nation, our citizens are losing faith and confidence and trust in a form of government. 1.5 million people have given their lives to defend. Every office holder takes that same oath to support and defend the Constitution. And we constantly have these bureaucrats making decisions as to what really falls into what it is that we want to have people to see. So it's a way of censoring people, but it's a way of attacking people. When President Trump's tax releases were exposed a couple years ago, at that time we were in a meeting with our Ways and Means group, and I said, listen, if the President of the United States cannot be assured that his taxes, his tax returns are confidential, every single American is vulnerable at this point, because they fear, by the way, they being the IRS, they fear absolutely no one on the other side of it. Everyone fears them.
No, that's a really great point, talking with Congressman Mike Kelly of Pennsylvania. And what gets me is that if their justification, the IRS's justification to withhold this exemption to Christians Engaged, to deny them this, is based upon they have their positions being so similar to that of Republicans, well, I'm just surprised that they didn't see the precedent that they would be establishing, because Planned Parenthood, they donate to 99.9% Democrats, and Democrats in Planned Parenthood, their principles and positions are exactly the same. Why? I mean, was that? I'm sure that they could see that could be applied in that manner.
Well, do you know what? First of all, I want to thank you, because throughout the years, you have been a big defender of the Constitution, and say there's not two different constitutions, one that you like and one that you will support and defend, and one that you're just not too sure of. And so you'll bend it, move it, do anything you can to make it fit whatever it is you want to do that day. And this censorship, which is taking place throughout our country, is the scariest thing of all. So, but did you come down to this? So when somebody has the audacity at the IRS to say, well, we reviewed this, and unfortunately, this is too pro-Republican. And I would just suggest to them, you know what? You need to get out of your chair and get to church and find out there are millions upon millions upon millions of Christians in the United States. I don't care how they're registered. I don't care how they vote. Their rights are being rescinded and taken away from them. If you can say, we, the IRS, will make a determination on whether we want this to go forward or whether we want to rescind it, we are really in much scarier times than we understand. But thanks to you and what you've done, when you expose this, all of a sudden they run for shelter. The one thing they don't like is sunlight. You know that. You can't put it on that sun guard to protect yourself when you're in that position. So they want to run from shelter. They want to hide for things. And they want to say, oh, no, nothing wrong here. Just move along. Yeah, look, we keep going through this with them. My goodness, whenever they expose, some information got to ProPublica, right? They started putting out there people's tax returns, usually wealthy people, because they were trying to talk about this wealth gap, tax gap that these rich people aren't paying their fair share. So the idea is you can go in there and expose different people And it starts off with those that people would identify and say, oh, yeah, Bill Gates, his taxes cut. Oh, yeah, Warren Buffett, yeah, we should go after him. Next thing it's going to start hitting Bill Smith and Jim Jones and Sally Jones. It starts at the top and works its way through. It's another way of censoring people. It's another way of dividing us as a nation, picking winners over losers and saying that somehow these people aren't paying their fair share and we're going to expose them for it, except for the people we don't want to expose.
And that's a really good point too, because you mentioned that leak of some of the wealthiest people in the United States by the IRS, and it happened very conveniently on the eve of Joe Biden's his speech to the nation, and he was presenting one of the $6 trillion America whatever plans that it was actually the tax increase and the infrastructure. That's what he was putting out there. So that was very interesting that the IRS seemed to be working in conjunction. That was great optics if for the Marxists within the party who wanted to shame people for being wealthy and making something of themselves, which then makes me think, because you have Christians engaged, and then I remember back in 2010 and 2011 when when different Tea Party groups were trying to organize and get tax exempt status, and the IRS, as you mentioned earlier, had denied them. They ended up having to settle for millions of dollars, and then the media didn't really pay too much attention to it. This has been going on for a really long time. How widespread do you think this is within the department?
You know what? Well, we really don't know, because that department's pretty close-lipped about things. They don't really answer questions. I mean, we wait weeks upon weeks and months sometimes to get an answer to a letter where we're asking to look into it. And this idea that somehow there's so many scofflaws out there, these people, if they just start paying their fair share, we really wouldn't have these problems with all these programs. It's just these people aren't paying their fair share. My answer to people that say that to me all the time, I said, you know what? If there's something in our tax code that needs to be fixed, then it needs to be fixed at our level, and it needs to be approached that way. We shouldn't be looking to go out on this witch hunt to find people, then hold them up as these are the bad examples, and we want you to know these are the people that are abusing the system. Yes, today, but then tomorrow they'll ratchet their way down to whomever they want. I don't get a good example. Everybody says, "Do you remember Lois Lerner?" Yeah, I sure do. Boy, really, she really went through it. I said she didn't do anything. They let her retire with her full pension benefits that are paid by the hardworking taxpayers of America. There was no penalty for what she did. The answer was, oh, there's a couple of rookies out of the Cincinnati office that they really didn't know what they were doing. We're going to get them on target. Then the other thing, our friends on the other side of the aisle said, the real problem with the IRS, doggone it, they need $80 billion to get that agency in order. I said, okay, fine. Would you show me the bids of the improvements? I want to know what the improvements are, what your highest priorities are, and did you get bids to see what it is that you want to replace? Don't tell me you need $80 billion, and when I ask you what it's for, to improve things. I said, thanks. I have 10 grandchildren that want me to improve things for them too. And I always sit down and say, what's the most important thing Grandma and I can do to help you? And there better be a positive return on it, not only for you, but for us. And I think the American taxpayers have a right to know what it is that their money's being collected and spent for. And if we can't run our government the way private businesses are run, we're in big trouble. And you already know, between funded and unfunded liabilities for this business called the United States of America, forget about the $30 trillion debt we have. It's actually $130 trillion in funded and unfunded liabilities as we go into the future. And so when you look at all these little boys and girls being born today, what we need to do is hand them that little notification that said, for the rest of your life, you're going to be so far in debt because your government spent your money without asking you, without any type of oversight that there should be, the way I would believe. Right. I don't want to spend a taxpayer's dollar any different than I spend my own dollar. If you're casual with the taxpayer's dollar, but really tight with your dollar, switch it around. Make sure that we're watching
and we're spending so much more on the IRS now. Well, that's at least in the proposal, in one of the infrastructure proposals, which I thought was, and really weaponizing the IRS. Let me ask you this, Congressman, too.
Sure.
I mean, how is the IRS held accountable in something like this? Because it's insane to me that they even get to make these determinations and that they're given as much power as they're given. But how does, as you were just telling me, it's very difficult even to get just basic information from them. You have to wait months just to get a letter answering some questions. So how do you hold them accountable?
Well, you should do it through oversight, right? We have oversight on Ways and Means, our oversight subcommittee. One of the things we're supposed to do is to have oversight, and we're supposed to be the people looking at for our hardworking American taxpayers. We're the ones that are representing them and making sure that things are in place the right way, and there's an accountability. Now, during this pandemic, my chief of staff, Tim Butler, is with me, and this is a shout out for every single congressional office in the United States. Each of those offices has become the IRS representative for our citizens. The IRS was shut down for a great period of time, working from home, and not getting their work done. Dana, we have, I think, 11 million tax returns, some as far back as 2019, that haven't even been looked at yet. And so people are asking me, I haven't got my refund. I have money coming to me, and say, well, as soon as they get through their backlog, we'll see what we can do to help you. But each of us, representatives now, are doing the best we can with staffs that are working as hard as they can to make sure the people whose money is being withheld is being handled the right way, and we're getting it back to them if they have a refund coming. But can you imagine anybody running a retail business? Can you imagine Amazon telling somebody, thanks for your order, we're going to get it back to you within 2 years or so? But this is the disconnect between this is the disconnect between the public sector and the private sector. The private sector could never run with the overload of debt that the government has done and say, yeah, we're doing the best we can. We just need a little more time off and a little more money, and we'll get it. One closing thing. So, we're telling all of our fellow citizens, look, doggone it, these benefits were there, but really, you need to get back to work. You need to get back to work. And once these unemployment spiffs start to go away, instead of having that extra money every month, you need to get back to your job. I mean, listen, nobody goes to work to make less. They go to work, usually you take an assignment if it's going to move you up.
Right.
How about this? We are asking the American people to get back to work. August the 1st, we leave Washington. We don't come back till sometime toward the end of September. So do as you say, not do as you do, don't do as you say. How can I ask one of my constituents, listen, you need to get back to work. I'll see you in a month and a half. And it's like, oh yeah. Thanks a lot, Kelly. So you know what? Integrity is just saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And more importantly, doing what you say.
Yeah, I agree, Congressman. I would love to see a bill, and it might be, one way I think maybe to hold the IRS accountable super fast is propose a bill where we kind of change how taxes are paid, maybe eliminate withholding, and everybody's got to write a check every quarter to the Treasury like small businesses do. Boy, oh boy, when people realize how much of their money goes to the IRS and then how much is wasted by the government, I think things would change real quick, Congressman. I think it would.
Oh, hey, listen,
good to see you.
Hey, what you do is things. What's the old story? When you expose what's going wrong, it usually gets fixed. It's when things aren't brought to light that they continue on. And because nobody said anything about it, I said, well, not only are we saying something about it, we are going to structure it so you have to do this. Now, be very clear about this. There are a lot of people that work at the IRS that are incredible people and dedicated to their jobs. But there's some reason, there's this kind of a weird philosophy that, we're the great enforcers, So the late John Lewis and I did a piece of legislation called the Taxpayer First Act, and what it really was is the IRS should be a customer service center. Yeah. Not the greatest fear you have at night that somehow they're coming to get me. Now, when they do come after you, by the way, I'm a small businessman, and somebody said to me, you better be careful. They're going to come after you. I said, you know what? They can come after if they want. They shut down your bank. What lender's going to help you if you're under investigation by the IRS? Right. All of a sudden, all your money sources dry up, and it's such a hammer over your head. But you know what? You better stand up sometime and say something. I know. For God's sake, we have I agree. Men and women in uniform that died to give us these rights. Why would we? I agree, and we shouldn't be fearing our government agencies. I think they should be abolished personally, but that's me. We got to get going though, Congressman Mike Kelly. Yes, good to see you, sir. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. You too. Thank you. All right, folks. Sometimes it doesn't feel like America. Sometimes when you see censorship, corporate censorship everywhere. Is it corporate anymore when the federal government's working with the new public square? So why is it happening and who's behind it? Rachel Bovard joins us next to discuss. Thank you for watching The First TV and supporting the only network dedicated to protecting free speech. You can now watch my program live or on demand at any time with the First TV app. And the best part is that the First TV app is 100% free. Just search The First TV in the App Store or on your phone, tablet, or smart TV and download it today.
Deplatforming, demands to speak about the vaccine only in state-approved ways, government censorship. All of this is on the rise. Rachel Bovard is the Senior Director of Policy for the Conservative Partnership Institute, and she joins us now. Rachel, welcome. Good to see you. And I think that you had a piece recently, and I have it linked on here, I think you had it at the American Conservatives, where you finally convinced me, your piece convinced me on the whole antitrust. I had some remaining questions, and you answered all of my remaining questions, which I'm going to touch on here in a minute. But this is the larger question that I keep coming back to, especially whenever I hear Jen Psaki talk about misinformation. If you have a group of scientists and doctors on one side and they have, their theories, and you have another group of scientists and doctors on the other side and they have their theories, who gets to determine what is misinformation and what isn't? Who picks the science that we go with?
Well, that's the big question with misinformation, because at the end of the day, whatever constitutes misinformation, the needs of the powerful decide that. Whoever's in charge decides what misinformation is. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the White House try to use the biggest speech platforms in the world under the guise of misinformation to control what is said. And not just on the platform, but in private messages, in text messages. They want to control it all the way down, not just about vaccines, but also about anything that goes against what they call the narrative about COVID-19. So this is a very, very concerning development in my mind, because you're seeing corporate power fuse with state power in really troubling ways.
Yeah, and that's just it. I think the big hurdle for a lot of conservatives and a lot of Republicans for so long was they want to respect private business rights, et cetera. But at the same time, as you just mentioned, when you have the federal government that is really colluding or conspiring really with these companies, then it ceases to be a private business operating in its, the way that it wants. It's not really that issue anymore. And then that's when the whole idea of antitrust comes in. Do you think the conservatives are kind of now, with all of this, shifting their perspective on that?
You definitely do see some conservatives now coming down on the side of, break up these companies, but no one's really sure how to do it. The left has some very good ideas that they say they're good ideas that I am a little skeptical of, because again, you see the White House right now not necessarily wanting to break up big tech. They want to use that power for themselves. They recognize these platforms as essential speech platforms. They know that narrative control is the first step to controlling a policy outcome. They want to use that power for themselves. So what does breakup actually look like, I think, is at the end of the day something the right has to get their heads around, because, antitrust, and I make this point in the piece, antitrust is not regulatory, it's law enforcement. If these companies have been found in the course of due process to be acting in uncompetitive ways, that goes against our laws, and they should be punished for that. So you see the Department of Justice under President Trump bring a lawsuit against Google alleging these anti-competitive acts. Now that's still working its way through the courts, but it could, at the end of the day, result in some lines of business being separated from Google, because at the end of the day, my biggest concern is the scale at which these companies operate. If Google controls information for only 30% of the world, as opposed to the 90% of the world they do now, it's much easier to co-opt them. It's much easier to wipe out sort of independent thought in America. So breaking the scale of these companies, in my mind, is the first step toward being able to actually compete a lot of these speech concerns away.
Yeah, and you touch on, Rachel, you touch on in your the pieces that you've written about this, just the big chunks. And I was actually surprised to see how much, like for instance, Amazon and particularly book sales and Google, et cetera, how much of the market they really do commandeer. And you brought up a really good point too, as it relates to some of the earlier antitrust action with, for instance, Microsoft, because Microsoft, this whole thing had to be done with Microsoft. And from that, and I had not realized, I knew it, but I hadn't really realized what the impact that this had. That's how we got Google, because Microsoft, they busted Microsoft, and then they allowed other entities to be able to compete and use the internet to reach Microsoft customers. A lot of people, and especially I think maybe younger millennials and definitely Gen Z, they're a generation removed from that. They're not entirely familiar with seeing that actually have worked out and how the impact that it has.
Yeah, that's right. Antitrust is designed to make sure the market's actually working. And I think so much of our conversation misses that point when we talk about antitrust. It's designed to make sure that competitors are actually competing on the merits and not because, they've maintained this uncompetitive dominance over certain sectors. So to your point, because of the Microsoft suit, because they lost that antitrust lawsuit, they really were separated from the browser market, and that allowed a really cool website called Google to develop, and a host of other innovations to take place in this space. And so I think we've reached the point with some of these tech platforms where we're in the same place that Microsoft was, where they're just so dominant that you don't even have small competitors being able to make a stand, or if they are there, their only exit strategy is to be bought by one of these big platforms. And so you have to ask yourself, is there some uncompetitive action going on here? And that's what antitrust is designed to investigate.
Yeah, and also I think, when people were talking about the digital public square previously before the lockdown and the pandemic, everything else, it was kind of, focused on just free speech. And of course, people were disagreeing on policy. But then we saw how that control and that intent to dominate all the discussion with one approved narrative, how the impact that has had on health and also people's their faith in their government institutions to listen to them about things like vaccines. And so do you think that it's at the point, even if we have the government, as you said, this is law enforcement, which is a great point, and not regulatory, it's law enforcement. Are we so far in having ceded the public square digitally to these big tech companies that there's really, where are we with that? Can we really actually kind of claw some of that back?
This is, I think, the struggle for the right in particular for the next decade is kind of assessing our policy response to this, because in my mind, antitrust is step one, but it's definitely not enough, because innovation, our public policy chases innovation in a lot of ways, and it definitely is in this space, because you're not just seeing sort of the massive economic dominance of these platforms, but these are also market access platforms. These are also massive data companies. They now control vast swaths of the economy far outside of speech. And so I think for the right, it's determining how we want to live in relation to companies that can now track us in unprecedented ways, that now, package and repackage our data, that can follow us all over the world, that know what we're saying in our homes. So all of these are elements of what I think has to be a robust policy conversation, because to your point, we've really moved in the last 15, 20 years from a physical world to a digital one. We're now living online and in a largely lawless space. Our policy hasn't kept up. So this is going to require a lot of solutions that I think we're really only starting to grapple with now.
Goodness, we're gonna have a very interesting decade ahead. Rachel Bovard, thank you so much for your smart pieces on this. Really appreciate it. It really persuaded me, and I was glad that you wrote them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, folks, calls to start blaming the unvaccinated. Well, it appears it's coming up from Republicans. You got to see this. Keep it here. Well, once again, the power of the Democrat media complex to force Republicans to take on their talking points, that is on display. Check out what Republican Alabama Governor Kay Ivey had to say today about unvaccinated people in her state. Watch.
What is it going to take to get people to get shots in arms?
I don't know. You tell me. Folks supposed to have common sense. But it's time to start blaming the unvaccinated folks, not the regular folks. It's the unvaccinated folks that are letting us down.
Because, if you're unvaccinated, you're not regular. It's as if a memo went out to all conservative thinkers, news outlets, and influencers. Time to get on the vax train, even if you have to suspend logic to do it. So I have a question. And anyone get back to me with the answer, and I'll be totally happy to share it on air. Seriously, any epidemiologist, any doctor, please explain to me the answer to this question. If the only person at risk of suffering severe effects from the coronavirus is a person who has not received the vaccine, the only person that truly that needs to be worried is an unvaccinated person, correct? My head's going to explode with this. I think yours is too. It's like everyone poured a tall glass of crazy and done drank it. Is there a surge in the hospitals? I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. Are there people who take the safe and effective vaccine? Yes. Yes, people are told this, right? They're told it's safe and effective, and that's why everybody needs to get it. And even if you get it, you apparently can still get the Delta Rona and spread it just like an unvaccinated person. Super spreader airlines, they taught us that last week when the Democrats infected half of Washington. But those Democrats and anyone else who's been vaccinated, they have virtually zero chance of dying from the Rona because they were vaccinated, right? Right? It's like that Natalie Portman meme with the guy, the little Anakin guy. Can't even remember what his name was, that actor. Anyway, so now it's up to the adults to decide whether or not they want to take the vaccine now. And if they don't, they're accepting a risk put to themselves. Just like people take personal risks every day, like choosing to ride a motorcycle, driving a car, right? They could get the virus and spread it, but so could the vaxxed person. So why are we still talking about this? Why is Kay Ivey not just saying what I just said? Why is she blaming anyone? Why blame people when they're only supposedly hurting themselves, right? If I'm vaccinated, what do I have to fear from my unvaccinated neighbor? That's seriously, does my vaccine only work if he's got the vaccine? I can't find the answer. What I can find are people calling other people names like not regular, blaming people for the pandemic, threats of lockdown, even from Republicans. It's like everyone is morphing into Dr. Fauci, who, when he can't answer a question, resorts to attacking people's character rather than refuting the charge or the question or argument. It's like we're witnessing the death of science. Everything's emotion, even now from some Republicans, like Governor Kay Ivey. They're tired of being harassed and blamed for a pandemic by the media, so they do what people often do, blame someone else, anyone else, even their own voters. And if that doesn't make sense, even if there's no science to back up the claim, even if it doesn't make sense, they'll still do it. And if science is dead, killed by panic emotion and political pressure and agendas, it's only going to get harder to get people to listen and ultimately to negotiate the next crisis. Did that ever occur to Governor Kay Ivey, and those irregular voters? That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.